So welcome and thank you, Chris Bostic, from ASH in the United States, for making time in this very busy World Conference on Tobacco Control to speak to ASH Scotland.
My pleasure.
How are you finding the conference so far?
Well, first, it's been a long time since we've had one, so it's really good to see old friends and some new ones. It's also, we tend to come away from the World Conference with several years of work just from the scheming that goes on the sidelines, which is why the last conference that was remote because of COVID really it wasn't the same thing. We have to get together to make this work properly.
We do. And ASH was the original of all the ASHs, wasn't it?
We were, 1967. It was meant as a reaction to that 1964 Surgeon General's report, which obviously there was plenty of evidence before then about the health impacts of smoking, but it was a document that pulled all that information together and concluded without any more question that smoking was killing people.
So what is happening in the United States in this field?
One word, chaos. The Trump administration has basically ended national tobacco control in our country. So the CDC's Office on Smoking and Health, which has been around since 1968, is now gone. There's not a single, that's 120 people, gone. The Office of Global Affairs at Health and Human Services, which they did broader than tobacco, but they were the ones, for instance, that negotiated the pandemic treaty, but also worked on tobacco, and they were the voice of health at the international fora, gone completely. And then the FDA's Center for Tobacco Products, which is in charge of regulating tobacco, basically got rid of everyone except for the people that approve new products to come in. So it's almost the opposite of tobacco control there. They're pushing products into the stream and not regulating the ones that are not supposed to be there.
So what would ASH like to see happen going forward?
Well, we're very much a proponent of endgame around the world, not just in the United States, but globally. We know that not everyone is ready for it. I think Scotland is one of those places that's ready for it, and you have your lovely your endgame goal, which you go on our website and see a map, and you're on there with a good pin. We think that especially in an era in the United States where we don't really have tobacco control anymore, it might be the obvious answer. When you look at what happens at the state and local level in tobacco control, I'm sure it's true everywhere. You have things like age verification, you have quit lines, you have public education, counter marketing. If all that's gone, and it might be because the CDC supplied a lot of the money to the states, getting rid of tobacco sales is super easy to implement and to enforce. I mean, if Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach, they don't have any enforcement mechanism. They just depend on the citizens to complain if they see tobacco anywhere. And since the first few months of it being in place, that hasn't happened. They haven't had any problems with enforcement in those places. And we're still looking to see how it will work in Massachusetts with all the tobacco-free, nicotine-free generation laws. But so far, so good. And Brookline's has been enforced for 4 years, and there hasn't the sky has not fallen there. So that's what we're pushing. That's the silver lining that we're trying to push domestically. But at the same time, we're very excited to see what's going on internationally. And at the last conference in 2018. Endgame was still a unicorn. It was this thing that people talked about, but it was crazy. It was so radical that most people ignored it. And this conference has changed 180 degrees.
Wow. So what is the policy in Brooklyn and places like that?
So Brookline passed a law that basically banned the sale of all nicotine products to anyone born after a certain date. And in Brookline, that date was January 1st, 2000. So basically, anyone born this millennium can never be sold tobacco in Brookline. They were sued, of course, as you'd expect, and they won that suit on a motion to dismiss, which, as you know, is basically the judge saying, you have nothing, and we're not going to continue with this case. They appealed it anyway to the state Supreme Court, and they had an en banc decision where it was unanimous that they said that towns have the right in Massachusetts to do this. So I consider this an own goal on the part of the tobacco industry, because they basically opened the floodgates for Massachusetts, and since that case came out, 16 more towns have passed similar legislation with different dates, because the idea was not to take the product ability to buy away from people that currently could, but to just put a line, draw a line in the sand, and say we're not going to allow the tobacco industry to get the next generations of nicotine addicted.
So what are some of the routes that you've heard about that you think have potential to get to that point?
You mean to get to the point where we have tobacco off the market?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of different policies that have been put forward. Some have been implemented, some haven't. I think from ASH's standpoint, and we call our endgame program Project Sunset, we don't we're not prescriptive on the policy. We're prescriptive on the goal. And when a jurisdiction comes to us and they're ready, they're endgame ready, we call them, and they ask for help, then we sit down with them and look at the context that's going on in that jurisdiction. And sometimes a tobacco-free generation law might be the way to go. Other places like Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach could be ready just to simply ban it. They only had about 6% prevalence at the time, and so they just got rid of it. They haven't had any trouble. We also have some jurisdictions that are phasing out retail licenses. My one sort of issue with the way that endgame is unrolling in the world is that people are treating it as a menu instead of a recipe. And as you know, New Zealand was the sort of the kickoff point, and everybody's imagination was drawn by what they had passed. But for some reason, only the tobacco regeneration concept made it out. And that was only one of 3 pillars of endgame that they were doing. They were looking at nicotine reduction and a massive reduction in the number of retailers. So I think we have some work to do to convince governments that if you truly want endgame, you need to put several policies that work together in unison to end it sooner than nicotine-free generation or tobacco-free generation. It might take 2 or 3 generations of people before we get to the end game. But in the meantime, I still support every tobacco-free generation law and bill, because at least it puts a backstop on it, and we can come back later and get rid of the rest of it. But we will stop addicting people.
So I'd like to see a focus on product and industry, the multinational corporates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do realize that we have to get rid of the tobacco industry, and it's funny that so many colleagues don't quite get that. I have two colleagues that work with me on the Project Sunset Steering Committee that have a paper in publication right now, laying out that we have to say goodbye to the tobacco industry to get tobacco endgame, which seems like a duh moment. But some people don't seem to get that, and it is a change in the way that we think. You know, I got my start in this field negotiating the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and at the time, the idea that we would do anything to actually end the industry was inconceivable. It was an assumption, even an unspoken one, that we will always have this industry. We just need to tweak how we deal with them, and I'm so glad to see that is now changing. And even the sessions here that haven't been about endgame, many of them have been about getting rid of the industry forever. And people in endgame, people target different things. Sometimes they target the product, sometimes they target the industry. The one thing we don't want them to target is the individuals who have been the victims of the tobacco. And that is a sea change too. When I started, we blamed the victim, and it was those darn people that smoke are causing all these troubles. They are our clients. They're not our opponents, and we need to do better about getting them on our side. And we know from polling all over the world that when they're asked about whether we should be doing tobacco endgame, more than half of them, always more than half, say yes, we should be doing that, and please take these products away from me, because I can't stop, and they're always in the store in front of me.
Yeah. And in the UK, we hear a lot about so-called consumer voice, but very often it's industry-funded tobacco harm reduction agenda organisations. You talk a bit about that?
Yeah, we call that astroturfing.
Explain astroturfing.
Astroturfing. Well, you have grassroots where people are actually coming forward and saying what they want policy to be, and then you've got people like the tobacco industry busing people in to say that no, we represent the grassroots, and then they pull out the paper that the tobacco industry gave them, and they read it out. That hasn't happened so much yet, at least in the United States, when it comes to hearings about tobacco endgame. It's been mostly retailers, although even then that's a little bit of astroturfing, because they bring in the corner store, the guy that's lived in the community for 20 years, but even they have a piece of paper that has been given to them, and I try to get on, most things are now hybrid, so you can get on and watch. I try to watch every one that I can, and it is amazing the mirror arguments that you see everywhere, not just even in the United States. I watched the House of Commons and the House of Lords debates as well. Very similar talking points coming out of the tobacco industry. I think they're frightened, and they ought to be. This is a death sentence for them, and they haven't had to face that before. And I'm not sure they know how to react. As I mentioned, they sued Brookline, and that was a mistake. because they opened the floodgates in Massachusetts. But they didn't sue Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach. And I don't think it was because they were smarter than in terms of opening the floodgates. I think it was because even they couldn't figure out a way to get past that motion to dismiss. There's no handle to grab there when you ban all tobacco products. There's no freedom of choice thing. There's nothing about you ban these products but not these products, and so that's illegal. So the pure ones seem to get through. And I also think they might not have sued because they didn't want to draw attention to it. And we've done these polls around the world. And when people are informed that it's possible, just from the question, they're very much in favor of it. But the problem is they don't know it's possible. And we found that 10 years ago when we first started talking about this to international colleagues. With the reactions we got varied, but a lot of people said, you can't do that. It's a legal product. And we had to point out to them that humans made up law. And we can decide when something is legal and illegal. Slavery was legal, and then it wasn't, and lots of other things like that. So the rest of the population has lived with tobacco all their lives. It's baked in to society, and when you ask them to imagine a world without it, they nod and say, yeah, let's do that. But they don't know it's even possible. Things I'm really hoping about the United Kingdom is that it's such a bigger population than we've had so far. That will have to make international news. And hopefully more people will be aware, and they'll start saying to their local decision makers, hey, why aren't we doing this as well? Yeah. That will make my job a lot easier.
So how is the UK viewed internationally?
With a bit of skepticism. That's probably putting it nicely. I think that the tobacco control world in general has leaned towards a complete abolition of nicotine products as the goal, which is, of course, mine as well. The United Kingdom has decided to focus on, their law on tobacco is just anything with actual tobacco in it. And I support it because it gets rid of combustibles. And that's the thing we have to, if we're only going to do some of it, it has to be those, because that's what's killing the vast majority of people. And the same with New Zealand. They focused on combustibles as well. So there's some skepticism from the rest of the world. But that's one outcome from this conference that I didn't expect, that people have been able to put forward their opinions and without being yelled out of the room, and that's kind of new. We had our endgame summit the day before this started, and I was very hesitant to even bring up the harm reduction argument because I didn't want to get the rest of the discussion derailed. But it went very well, and people laid out their reasons for why they thought one or the other, and although we'll never agree maybe, we can agree to disagree and move forward together on endgame without tearing each other down, and which is exactly what the industry wants. And I think that was one of the major reasons they went for alternative products. Is just that it was so easy to speak with one voice before that, and they got us tearing at each other's throats. Can't do that.
And you have personally advocated for the environmental impacts of tobacco to be addressed. Tell me a bit more about that.
Sure. So I came about that from an endgame perspective, but I am an environmentalist, and when I went to law school, it was my intention was to do international environmental law. So when the opportunity came up to participate in these negotiations to ban plastic pollution, we decided that this was something we couldn't let go by. So we've been there advocating for the abolition of cigarette filters, and also plastic nicotine products, which in some ways are even worse because the battery being infused in there makes it even less possible to collect and recycle. I consider it an endgame measure because most people that smoke have never smoked an unfiltered cigarette. And I imagine a lot of adults, when that's their only option, are going to quit. Yeah. I also think that a lot of 12-year-olds who take their first puff from an unfiltered cigarette are going to cough and throw it away, as opposed to let's try that some more. So I have high hopes. There's only one jurisdiction that's done it, and that's Santa Cruz County, California. And something happened just this week that was very promising, that when they passed their county law, it wouldn't go into effect until 2 cities within the county had also passed it. And we learned on Monday that the second city had done so, which means that now will come into effect on January 1st, 2027. And I know that I serve on the state advisory board for Endgame for California, and I know that a lot of other towns have been watching what Santa Cruz is doing, and I feel like we're going to get something like we have in Massachusetts when they put that into effect.
Wonderful. Anything else that you'd like to talk about we haven't covered?
No, does anybody watching, I'll help you with endgame.
Great, great. Yeah, and what's the role for organisations like ASH Scotland?
Well, to keep pushing that envelope, and ASH Scotland has done that. I think that it could be a model for how to get to endgame. It wasn't, let's just go straight to it. And I think that's one thing people misunderstand too about endgame. In chess, endgame is not checkmate. It's not knocking the king over. It's the series of moves that get you to the point where you can trap the king and knock him over. And I think ASH Scotland's done a wonderful job of that, of addressing all the different tobacco control measures that get us to the point where we can consider finally ending the tobacco epidemic.
That's a good point to wrap up on. Chris Bostic, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.